Before I begin, I want to say thank you for listening. I am not a big storyteller. I am just someone with a few memories that still live in me. When I share them, it is because silence gets heavy sometimes. If this touches you, if you feel something as you listen, please think about subscribing. Leave me a comment too. Tell me where you are, what time it is for you, and what brought you here. I read them all and I carry them with me. Now, here is the truth I never thought I would tell. My daughter-in-law banned me from my son's wedding. There was no phone call, no conversation, no chance for me to ask why. Just a letter with her name on it, sealed in silver, as if pride could shine like wax. I erased the boy she is marrying. I carried him through fevers, storms, and scraped knees. I taught him to tie his shoes. I stayed up with him when he could not sleep. I raised him alone after his father passed, and every piece of the man he became came through my hands. But because I did not fit the image she wanted, I was erased. I did not fight, I did not call, I did not beg, I said nothing at all. But silence is not empty. Silence holds more than words ever can. Sometimes it holds grief, sometimes it holds power, and sometimes it holds everything you are not ready to hear. On the day of her wedding, when she expected perfection, she learned what it means to cross a woman who remembers everything. A woman who knows that roots run deeper than flowers. A woman who knows that houses, gardens, and memories cannot be stolen. They can only be reclaimed. It began with a quiet morning, the kind where nothing shouts for attention, the kind where grief hides in the corners and the world feels half asleep. I was pruning roses along the back wall of my garden. My husband had planted them 20 years ago and they still bloom as if he never left. The sun was weak, not yet committed, only a pale light along the roof's edge. I did not hear the postman. I only heard the soft crunch of gravel and the faint slide of something being pushed into the box. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked barefoot across the stones. There it was, a heavy envelope, ivory in color, sealed with a mark I did not recognize. My name was written across it in a slanted script. It was not Caleb's handwriting. My stomach knew the truth before my eyes did. I held the envelope too long, as if waiting would change what it carried. Finally, I opened it with a rusted key from the garden shed. At the request of the couple, we regret to inform you that you are not invited to attend the wedding of Caleb Moore, my son, and Vivian Hale, my daughter-in-law. The rest was details. Dates, dress code, venue directions, and a map to a celebration that now excluded me. My hands did not shake. My eyes did not cry. The rose shears were still warm in my palm. I placed them on the counter and let the kitchen sink run too long while I stared at the water. I made tea, forgot it, then made another. The second cup steamed beside me as I sat at the window looking out at the garden. That was the garden where Caleb buried toy cars in the soil. That was the place where my daughter Lena built fairy houses from broken flower pots. It all seemed so far away now. I could not remember the last time Caleb had called me without Vivian's voice near him. She was always there, faint in the background, or heavy in his silence. I should have expected this, I thought. Vivian is the type who bends the world until it fits in her palm. The first time I met her, she came to my house for Thanksgiving. She wore a navy dress and a guarded smile. Her handshake was soft, but her eyes counted every detail in the room. She complimented the table, then rearranged the forks without asking. After dinner, she asked about the stuffing. When I said yes, I always used the same recipe. She smiled like she was humoring a child. "How charming," she said. When she left, I stood in the doorway long after her perfume had faded. Something told me then, this is a woman who will not forgive easily, a woman who will keep score. I should have listened harder to that thought. I did not tell anyone about the letter at first. I did not want to explain, and I did not want pity. I folded it once, placed it on the counter, and stared at it as if the paper itself could give me an answer. But answers do not come that easily. And this was only the beginning. Before I continue, I want to ask all of you to please give a like to this video and subscribe to my channel, The Silent Stories, for more stories like mine. Your support means the world to me. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment telling me which country you're tuning in from. It's incredible to see how far this community of wonderful people has grown, and I'm so grateful to be able to share my story with you. He letter sat in my hands like it carried a weight. It was not heavy in truth, but in meaning it was heavier than stone. My name looked strange on the front. It was written in smooth, stylish letters, the kind of writing that belongs on invitations for strangers, not for a mother. I touched the paper again and again. The ivory color was rich, the seal pressed firm, silver wax shaped into a crest I did not know. I traced it with my finger, thinking how much pride it must have taken to stamp it like that. Pride for her, not for me. I opened it slowly, even though part of me did not want to. The words inside were neat, perfect, and cold. At the request of the couple, we regret to inform you that you are not invited. That single line cut deeper than any long explanation ever could. My son's name, Caleb, was written there beside hers. Vivian, a union that should have been joy, now stood before me like a closed door. I read the letter twice, then 3 times. It did not change. The date was there, the location was written, the dress code listed in soft black ink. Every detail about the day was carefully planned, and yet the one detail that mattered most to me was absent: my place. The roses outside still swayed in the light breeze. Their petals had not fallen because of the letter. The world had not stopped because my son's wedding had been closed to me. But inside, my breath felt uneven. I put the letter on the counter. I filled the kettle and boiled water for tea. I poured a cup, added honey, sat at the table. I forgot it. I poured another. This time I sat with it long enough to see the steam rise and fade. I stared out the window at the garden. That garden had been my whole world once. Caleb buried toy cars there when he was small. I remember him running to me with dirt on his knees, laughing as if the world was only soil and sky. Lena built little fairy houses in the same corner, stacking broken pots with care. That garden held their childhood, and yet here I was, sitting with an envelope that told me my place in their grown life was gone. I thought of the last time Caleb had called me. I could hear Vivian's voice faint in the background. She always seemed near him. Even when silent, her presence filled the call. I knew then I had already lost pieces of him. The letter only confirmed what silence had whispered for months. Still, I did not cry. My eyes stayed dry, my hands stayed still. I placed the letter back in its envelope and folded it neatly. I slid it into a drawer, under the tea bags and napkins, out of sight but not out of me. The house was quiet, too quiet. I could almost hear the letter humming in the drawer, alive with what it carried. My husband's study was down the hall, his books still smelling of cedar. The house felt heavy with memory. I told myself not to be surprised. Vivian had shown me who she was from the start. A woman who needed control. A woman who corrected forks on a table, who polished words until they cut. And yet part of me had hoped she might see me not as something to remove, but as a root she could grow from. That hope had been foolish. As the evening came, shadows stretched across the floor. I lit a lamp, but even the light felt thin. I sat with my tea until it went cold again. My silence did not break. I spoke no words to the empty room. But inside me silence began to take shape. Not weak silence. Strong silence. The kind that waits. I thought of Caleb's face as a child, his laughter, his first steps, his hand reaching for mine when storms frightened him. I thought of how much of that had been erased in one letter, and I thought of the truth that no letter, no bride, no seal could take away what I had lived and built. That night I folded the letter once more, and set it on the table before me. I looked at it long enough to know it would not break me. Then I put it away. I went to bed in the quiet. I did not dream. I only rested, knowing this was not the end. It was only the beginning. I could not sleep that night. The house was quiet, but my mind was not. I lay awake and let memories move through me like shadows. Some memories were soft, others sharp. They came without warning. I thought first of Caleb as a boy. He was always running. He never walked when he could run. Through the hall, through the yard, down the slope of the garden where the grass grew thick. His knees were always scraped. His palms always carried tiny cuts from climbing trees. Each time he fell, I was there to lift him. Each time he cried, I held him until his breath grew steady again. I remembered the nights after his father passed. Caleb was young then, too young to understand why the house felt heavier. He would knock on my bedroom door and whisper, "Mama, are you awake?" I always said yes, even when I had been asleep. He would curl into my arms and fall back into dreams. In those moments, I knew my whole purpose was to keep him safe. Lena was different. She was the builder. She took broken flower pots and turned them into little fairy homes. She placed twigs as fences, tiny shells as doors. Caleb teased her sometimes, but he always helped her carry stones for the roofs. They argued, then laughed, then built again. That garden was their world, and I was part of that world, not outside it. I thought too of the day Caleb brought Vivian home. It was Thanksgiving. He had called ahead, saying he was bringing someone special. His voice on the phone was nervous but proud. I baked more pies than needed, set the table with the good china, polished the glasses. I wanted to make her feel welcome. When she arrived, she wore a navy dress that looked pressed and perfect. Her smile was polite, but it did not reach her eyes. Her handshake was soft, yet her gaze was sharp, like she was counting everything in the room. She told me the table was lovely, then moved the forks to another place without asking. I watched her do it. Her movements were smooth, practiced, as if she had been rearranging things her whole life. At dinner, she ate politely. She asked questions about the recipe. When I said yes, I used the same recipe for stuffing every year. She smiled. "How charming," she said. The words were sweet, but her tone was not. I felt small in that moment, as if something simple I had loved for years had been made into a joke. After dinner, she stood by the window, looking out at the garden. She did not comment on the roses. She did not ask about the soil or the fairy houses or the chipped pots that still sat in one corner. She only asked Caleb if they were leaving soon. He nodded. He followed her out without turning back to wave. I stood in the doorway long after they drove away. The night was cool and the stars were faint, but I stayed there. I thought to myself, this is a woman who will not forget a grudge. My heart whispered then that trouble would come, but I did not listen hard enough. More memories came, the small ones that seem unimportant, until they piled together. Caleb calling less often, his words shorter, his laughter on the phone softer, as if measured. I began to hear her voice in the background, sometimes faint, sometimes firm. Even in silence, her presence filled the air. Once I called to ask about his work. He answered, but she took the phone after a moment. "Caleb is busy," she said. Her voice was polite, her tone final. She ended the call quickly. I stared at the phone for a long time after that. It felt like the start of something I could not stop. I remember one Sunday when I invited them for dinner. She declined for them both. Her reason was simple. "We have other plans." No apology, no suggestion of another time. Caleb never called back to explain. The next Sunday was the same. Then the one after. Eventually I stopped setting 2 extra plates, and now, years later, a letter had arrived to finish what silence had already begun. I was not invited. My son had not spoken a word. His bride had spoken for him. As I lay in bed, I thought of my husband. If he had been here, what would he have said? He had always been steady. He had always seen through people without needing many words. I imagined him standing at the table that night at Thanksgiving, smiling kindly, but noticing the rearranged forks. I imagined him meeting her eyes, not unkind, but unshaken. He would have told me later, "Be careful. She likes control." I rolled to my side and closed my eyes. The house creaked with age. The roses outside rustled in the wind. The letter waited in the drawer. My heart felt both heavy and clear. The truth was simple. My son had brought her into his life, and in doing so he had let her draw lines around mine. She had drawn those lines sharp enough to cut, but roots, I knew, do not care for lines. Roots grow where they choose. That thought carried me into sleep at last. A thin, restless sleep. A sleep filled with gardens, with laughter, with the soft echo of a boy who once called me Mama without hesitation. The next evening, rain tapped lightly on the roof. The house smelled of wet soil and roses. I was in the kitchen cutting vegetables when the door opened without warning. Maya came in, her voice loud as always. "Hello, you here?" I smiled faintly. Maya had never been gentle with doors. She had known me since school. She carried storms wherever she went. Her hair was damp, her coat dripping water onto the floor. She looked around, her eyes bright and searching. "What's that?" she asked, pointing to the envelope on the counter. I froze. The letter lay there, opened but not hidden. Before I could move, she picked it up. She read it once, then again. Her face hardened. "What is this? What does it mean?" Her voice grew louder with each word. I said nothing. I wiped my hands on a towel. "They didn't invite you? Your own son? His own mother?" Her tone shook the walls. I nodded once. My nod was all I had. Maya dropped the letter onto the floor, as if it burned her. "Unbelievable. You gave him your whole life. You raised him alone. You built him piece by piece. And now some polished girl tells you you're not welcome? And he agrees?" I bent down, picked up the letter, folded it neatly, and placed it back on the counter. "He did not stop her," I said quietly. Maya's eyes filled with disbelief. "And you're just going to accept this?" I placed the letter into a drawer, under the napkins and tea bags. "I already did." Maya stared at me like I had spoken in a language she did not know. She paced the room, her boots leaving little wet prints on the tiles. "You're not going to call him? You're not going to fight?" "No," I said. My voice was calm, not weak. She stopped moving. "Then what are you going to do?" I did not answer. Some decisions live too deep for words. That night, after Maya left, I cleaned the dishes. I turned off the lights. I walked down the hall to the study. The air there smelled of cedar and old paper. My husband's books still lined the shelves. His chair still sat by the desk, empty but present. I opened the filing cabinet. The lock stuck, as it always had. My fingers remembered the rhythm. Inside was a folder tied with twine. Across the top in faded blue letters it said Maple Hollow Estate. I sat in the chair and held the folder in my lap. Maple Hollow. It was the place where Caleb had taken his first steps on the grass. The place where we had hosted my mother's memorial under flowering dogwoods. The place where my husband and I had once danced barefoot before illness changed everything. I had dreamed once of Caleb's wedding there. I had pictured the lawn filled with family. I had imagined laughter rising beneath the trees. When Caleb got engaged, I had suggested it gently. Vivian smiled at me, but her smile cut like glass. "We've already chosen a venue," she said, and I said nothing more. Now the thought of Maple Hollow returned to me, not as a dream, but as something else. A key. I opened my laptop and typed a name I had not spoken in years. Agnes Reed. The daughter of the woman who once owned Maple Hollow. She and I had been pregnant at the same time. We had sat together one summer on her porch, both of us holding glasses of lemonade. We had shared dreams of the children we carried. Her number was still listed. I called. Her voice was slower than I remembered, softer, older. "Agnes, it's Eliza." "Eliza," she said with surprise. "It's been years." "Yes." I paused. My heart beat steady. "I want to buy it. The estate." Silence stretched between us. Then her voice came back, quiet but firm. "Why now?" "Because it's still mine," I said. "It just doesn't know it yet." We said no more about the wedding. We said no more about Vivian. There was no need. Women like us knew how to speak in absences. When I ended the call, the room felt heavier, as if it had been listening. Outside, the garden bent in the wind. The roses stood tall, pink and stubborn against the rain. I placed the folder back in the drawer. I closed it carefully. I turned off the light, and for the first time since I had opened that envelope, I allowed myself a small smile. Not a smile of anger, not a smile of revenge. A smile of memory. A smile of roots. A smile that knew some things cannot be taken from a mother. Not quietly. Not cleanly, not without cost. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house was still dark. I sat with a cup of tea at the kitchen table. The letter in the drawer no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a map leading me back to Maple Hollow. By noon, I was driving out of town. The road was almost the same as I remembered. Fence posts leaned at odd angles. Mailboxes rusted along the bends. The air grew heavier the closer I came, heavier but familiar. When I turned onto the gravel drive, I slowed. The old sycamore still stood near the entrance, its branches bent low with age. I parked under it and let my hands rest on the steering wheel. I could see the main house through the trees. Ivy still covered the walls. The porch sagged but held on with quiet grace. Time had touched it, but it had not destroyed it. Agnes opened the door before I knocked. She looked older, but her eyes were the same. Eyes that carried both memory and weight. "You cut your hair," she said. "And you stopped dyeing yours," I answered. For a moment we simply looked at each other. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled of bergamot and dust. The wallpaper had faded, but it still held her mother's touch. The mismatched teacups were lined up neatly in the cabinet. My chest ached at the sight. We sat together in the sunroom. Light poured in through tall windows and cut across the floor in gold shapes. "I heard about the wedding," she said. I traced my finger along the rim of the teacup she had given me. "You don't have to pretend you don't know why I'm here." "I figured," she replied. "Your name showed up at the property office last week. I was waiting for the call." "Do you still hold the deed?" "Mostly. The paperwork is messy. My brother wants to sell. It can be a full buyout." She leaned closer. "Are you sure?" "I'm not here for drama," I said softly. "I'm not here for revenge." She gave me a long, steady look. "But you're here." I didn't answer. She didn't need me to. We walked to the porch. The wood creaked under our steps, but the sound was familiar. We sat with our tea. Two deer moved across the far lawn, unbothered by us. "I miss your husband," Agnes said suddenly. "I do too," I whispered. "He used to fix things, quietly, without being asked." "He never fixed the cabinet door in the guest house," I said. She laughed softly. "It still sticks." Her face softened for the first time. "I never thought you'd come back here," she admitted. "I never thought I would need to." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "The staff is still mostly the same. Some new faces. They'll follow your lead. I'll be discreet." "You don't have to be," she said gently. "But I know you. You'll choose silence over noise." That was true. I didn't want to ruin anything. I only wanted to remind them. Later she brought out a folder. Inside were papers, contracts, signatures waiting. She placed a pen in my hand. "You can sign today." I looked at the lines, at my name waiting to appear again in ink. My hand did not tremble. I signed. My name looked calm, steady, like it had been waiting there for years. When I finished, the house felt heavier. Not in sorrow, but in presence. It had always been mine. Now it knew it again. The days after that passed quietly. I did not shout orders. I did not announce changes. I made calls. I moved names on lists. I shifted payments. Deliveries scheduled for Vivian's perfect day were quietly canceled. Vendors were refunded. Staff were reassigned. No noise. Just absence applied like pressure. I did not need to fight her. I did not need to argue. I only needed to take back what already belonged to me. One evening I walked through the garden. The roses had grown wild. I left them that way. There is truth in untamed things. My husband's roses stood proud, defiant, pink against the fading sky. They had survived storms before. They would survive this too. That night, as I closed the gate at Maple Hollow, I stood for a long time with my hand on the iron. I thought of Caleb. I thought of Vivian. I thought of the letter. No, I was not angry. No, I was not seeking revenge. I was simply remembering. And sometimes remembering is more powerful than anything else. The rehearsal day came fast. The sky was pale and soft, like it was holding back rain. I arrived early at Maple Hollow. I stayed upstairs behind a curtain in one of the old bedrooms. From there I could see the courtyard below. Vivian arrived first. Of course she did. She always liked to be early to take command. She wore a white dress, simple but sharp. Her walk was steady, her chin lifted. A planner followed 3 steps behind, holding a clipboard too heavy for his hands. Vivian's voice carried across the courtyard. It was clear, sharp, cutting through the air. The chairs must face west, she said. The light will be better for the photos. The staff shifted nervously. One man tried to explain that the chapel faced east. She cut him off with a smile that was not a smile. Do it anyway, she said. She moved to the roses near the chapel gate. The roses had been planted by my husband. They had survived storms, droughts, and years of silence. She pointed at them and said, "These look dated. Remove them. Replace them with something clean, white." The planner hesitated. "They're original to the estate." "Then they've served their time," she answered. Her tone was final. I did not move. I only watched. From my window I could see the staff's unease. They were not hers. Not anymore. Their pay came through me now, quietly without her knowing. The weight of the estate had shifted. Later Caleb arrived. He was late. His hair was damp, his shirt untucked. He looked tired, like he had been running. He greeted Vivian with a kiss near her cheek. She barely noticed. She handed him a paper instead. "Your vows are too short," she said. "They're honest," he answered softly. "They can be honest and still poetic. Rewrite them." She turned back to the planner without waiting for his reply. I watched him hold the paper. He looked down at it as if it carried more than words. He looked like a boy again, a boy with a script he did not write. Vivian clapped her hands once. The bridal party froze. She rearranged them with quick instructions. Her smile flashed when anyone questioned her. It was the kind of smile that felt like a warning. In the back I noticed another figure, a woman named Claire, Vivian's friend. She stood still, watching everything but saying nothing. Her calm reminded me of myself when I was younger, quiet but always observing. The rehearsal moved like a performance. Vivian adjusted every detail. The flowers, the ribbons, the plates on the table. Nothing escaped her. But what she did not notice was this: her stage was not hers. The staff now waited for my word. The deliveries she had planned were redirected. The roses she had dismissed would return to the chapel gate tomorrow morning. I left the window and walked slowly downstairs. I took the long path through the side garden. The earth smelled damp, full of memory. When I reached the chapel, it was empty. The rehearsal had ended. I stepped inside. The silence there felt thick, as if the walls remembered voices that had just left. I walked down the aisle slowly. My hand brushed each pew. I paused near the center. Sunlight cut through the stained glass, scattering colors across the floor. The light touched my skin like an old blessing. This chapel had been built by hands that cared. It had held laughter, vows, tears. It had once been holy, not holy in religion, but holy in family. I lit a single candle at the altar, not as a prayer, not as a curse, just as presence, a flame that reminded the air of memory. I left it burning when I walked out. That evening I sat on the porch with Agnes. We shared a glass of wine. She did not ask how the rehearsal went. She had seen the cars come and go. "She's certain of herself," Agnes said. "Yes, she thinks that makes her safe." "Yes. Are you going to let her learn otherwise?" I shook my head. "No, I'm going to let her learn that she has never been seen at all." The stars appeared one by one. My phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. "Rehearsal went okay. Hope you're good. Love you." No mention of the letter. No mention of me being erased. Just hollow words light as paper. I did not reply. I turned the phone face down. Inside the house was quiet. Outside the roses swayed in the night wind. The silence held me steady, and I knew the wedding would not belong to her. The morning of the wedding came quiet. The sky was soft gray, the air cool, as if the day itself was waiting. Mist clung to the grass. The roses by the chapel gate stood tall, pink, against the pale light. I stood at the window of the house holding a cup of tea. My hands were steady. My heart was steady too. The first car arrived. A white SUV, its doors tied with ribbons. A woman stepped out wearing a pale hat. She walked to the gate and pulled at it. It did not open. She pulled again, harder, still closed. She looked around, confused. Another car came. Then another. Guests in fine clothes stepped out. They stood near the gate, waiting for it to swing open. It stayed shut. Their voices grew soft, nervous. From my place by the trees I watched. I did not move forward. I did not call out. I simply stood and let silence do the work. The chapel was ready inside. Flowers lined the aisle. Candles flickered in glass jars. White petals had been scattered carefully across the floor. Everything looked perfect. But no one would see it. By noon, many guests had left. Some shook their heads. Some spoke in low voices. Some would not look at Caleb. They walked back to their cars and drove away. The gravel road carried them out one by one. Caleb stood near the edge of the drive. His hands were in his pockets. His eyes looked far away. He did not speak. He did not smile. For a moment I thought he might turn to the trees where I stood. I thought he might see me. But he did not. Vivian stayed by the gate. Her veil trembled in the breeze. She did not shout. She did not cry. She stood still, her dress heavy with silence. The bouquet slipped from her hand and fell onto the gravel. Ivory roses bound in ribbon. Their edges browned in the damp air. She did not pick them up. Her friend Claire stood nearby. She bent, lifted the bouquet, brushed the dirt away and held it out. Vivian looked at it as if it were something foreign. Then she turned and walked away. Claire placed the bouquet back on the gravel and followed her slowly. I stayed in the trees. My breath was calm. My chest carried no triumph, only release. A long, deep release I had been holding for months. The chapel doors never opened. The altar remained untouched. No vows were spoken. No music played. Only silence filled the air. A silence strong enough to press against ribs and stay there. When the last car left, the estate grew still. No perfume, no laughter, no chatter. Only the sound of birds above, and the faint rustle of leaves. I stepped from the trees. My shoes crunched softly against the gravel. The estate was empty, yet full. It held everything that had not happened. I walked to the chapel. The doors stood closed, waiting. I pushed them open. Inside, the candles still burned faintly. The air smelled of roses and wax. I moved down the aisle slowly. My dress brushed the petals meant for another woman. I reached the first pew and sat. My hand rested on the wood, tracing the same lines my husband once smoothed with sandpaper. His presence lived in the walls. So did mine. I sat there for a long time. No music, no voices. Only the quiet breathing of a space that remembered. When I rose, I lit a candle at the altar. I left it burning. I did not need it to light the room. I only needed it to stay. A flame for memory. A flame for presence. Outside, the bouquet still lay on the gravel. I walked past it without touching it. Some things are meant to be left behind. The roses by the chapel gate swayed gently in the wind. They bloomed for no one. They bloomed anyway. And in that silence, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Closure, not peace, not triumph, but closure. The wedding had not been destroyed. It had simply not happened. And that was enough. It has been weeks since the wedding that never happened, or perhaps I should call it a wedding that ended before it began. Time feels strange now. Days pass, but they carry no sharp edges, only a soft blur. The papers never wrote names. They only said a mysterious cancellation at historic Maple Hollow. No details, no scandal, just silence. A silence too neat to be an accident. I sit on the porch most mornings. The roses bloom steady, their petals brown a little at the edges now. Even beauty has its end. But they still stand tall. They still carry memory. Agnes comes by often. She brings croissants sometimes. Half of them we do not eat. We sit and drink coffee and watch the garden. Some mornings we talk about the past. Other mornings we say nothing. The silence between us feels full, not empty. She asked me once if I hated Vivian. I said no. Hate is too easy. I do not hate her. I see her hunger to control. I see her need to erase. I see the sharpness in her smile, and I see what it cost her. That is enough. Caleb has not called me, not directly, but Lena told me he is living alone now. A small apartment near the city. No furniture yet, just a mattress on the floor. A stack of dishes still in boxes. He carries the letter I wrote him, she said. He keeps it by his bed. I do not know if I believe that, but I hope it is true. Sometimes at night I think of him as a boy, his hand in mine, his laughter in the garden, the way he pointed at tall sunflowers and said, "Mama, look, they're reaching up." I wonder if he remembers. One evening I found a small envelope in the chapel. It was not mine. It was not Lena's. The handwriting was Vivian's. My heart knew it at once. I did not open it right away. I held it in my lap for a long time. Finally I slid it open. Inside were only a few lines. They were not sharp. They were not cruel. They simply said, "You won. I hope you're happy." I read it once. Then again, I folded it back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer with the other letter. 2 letters now. One that cut me. One that admitted loss. Both carried silence inside. I do not feel like I won. There was no victory. There was only truth. A truth too quiet for her to hear until it was too late. Agnes asked me, "Do you think Caleb will forgive her?" I shook my head. Forgiveness is not the point. Memory is. She nodded, and we sat again in silence. At night I walk the chapel alone. The candle still burns on the altar. I keep relighting it. Not for revenge, not for grief. For presence, for roots, for all the things that cannot be erased. The estate feels whole again. It feels like it belongs to itself. No stage, no performance, only memory. Sometimes I wonder if Caleb will come back. Not tomorrow, not next week, maybe not even next year, but someday when silence has worked its way into him too, maybe he will return. Maybe he will sit with me in the garden and see the roses as they are, not dated, not disposable, alive. For now I wait. Waiting does not hurt me. Waiting is something I have learned well. The sky tonight is clear. Stars spread across it in soft patterns. I sit on the porch with my tea and watch them appear one by one. Each light is distant. Each light is steady. I think of my husband. I think of how he used to fix things without being asked. He could not fix death. He could not fix time. But he fixed small things. Doors, shelves, cracks in the wall. Quiet work. Steady work. I feel close to him now. I whisper to the night, I did not fight. I remembered, and remembering was enough. The wind carries the scent of roses through the air. The house hums softly around me. Silence wraps itself across my shoulders like a shawl. Before I end, I want to thank you for listening. I am only one voice. I am not a writer, not a poet, just a mother who kept quiet when words would have broken me. If this story touched you, please subscribe. Leave me a comment. Tell me where you are and what time it is as you listen. I read them all. This was my story. A story of a letter, a gate, and a house that remembered me when others did not. And now I leave you in the quiet.